Hi everybody, my name is Jens Larsen. Tal Farlow is of the first generation of guitar players to come after Charlie Christian. So he started making records in the 50s at the same time as people like Jim Hall and Jimmy Rainey, and a little bit earlier than people like Wes or George Benson. In this video I'm going to take a look at a few phrases from his solo on Gone with the Wind, and I'm going to try and highlight some of the things I find typical for his playing in terms of him playing across the bar line and being a bit creative with where he's playing which change, how he can take a melodic idea and move that across several changes, and also how he has a very personal way of introducing larger intervals into his lines. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar, improve the way that you solo, check out some interesting arpeggios or chord voicings, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to make sure not to miss anything, then click the little bell notification icon next to the subscribe button. This first example starts off with Tal Farlow playing something that's pretty straight ahead and in the changes, and there's nothing going on because it's an E-flat major chord and he's playing an E-flat major first inversion triad. So first just an F 2 years into it, and then the E-flat triad, like this. And then I think in general with the first two lines of Gone with the Wind, they consist out of turnarounds, so it's, or 2-5-1s in a key. So first it's just twice a 2-5-1 in the key of E-flat major, and then the same but then in G major. And I think it's kind of open how he's playing in these turnarounds, that he's also sometimes just thinking the 1 chord a lot or extending the 2 or the 5 chord a lot. And you will see that in the lines here. You see that already in this example, because after the triad, so then the next part I think is still just an encircling of the 5th of E-flat and then the root, even though it's on the F minor chord. From here he moves into something that's definitely more, and that's really just because he has a leading note and then he's really emphasizing the A flat, which is really giving us that it's either, well, F minor, in this case probably B flat 7, and then here moving back to E flat just on the root, running down with some more chromaticism, and then continuing that movement and now aiming to go to G major, so just a scale run, moving down, continuing down the scale but modulating on the bar line, so he can hit the bar line whenever he really wants to, if there was any doubt. And then just continuing that descending movement and then ending on the low E over the D7. This example is on the turnarounds in G major, and I think it's a very good example of how it's a little bit unclear whether Tal Farlow is thinking A minor, D7 or G major sometimes, because the first part is pretty clear, so that's really just A minor, and he's starting with an encircling of the 3rd of the chord, so really aiming for that C, that's clear enough. And then we get what would appear to be the arpeggio from the 3rd, so C major 7. But there's a really nice detail in this, because he actually ends on the leading note to the last note and then resolves it, which I think is a really cool thing to do actually, and that I'm gonna try and get into my playing. Then from the B he's running down a G major triad, which doesn't necessarily really tell us that it's D7, but as you saw in the first example, this is already pretty flexible in terms of what goes where with the turnarounds. Then from here we get what is essentially C major triad in the first inversion, first chromaticism, and then the C major triad. So again we kind of have the movement just going back and forth between the G and the A minor or the G and the D, but not necessarily in the harmonic rhythm of the piece or what the rhythm section is playing. Then from there we get some more chromaticism. This is actually pretty dense with chromaticism for the time where it's recorded. I think this is not something that you're gonna find. It's almost something that I would connect with later Pat Metheny, because from from the C major triad, he actually skips up. Again, we are skipping up to a leading note for the B. So we actually have this interval. And then another encircling of the D, now with E and C sharp. And then from the D down an E minor 7 arpeggio. And then through E flat and D, where he ends the line, and this is on the D7. So in this line you have first this idea of making sort of the triplet arpeggio and then ending on the leading note to the top note of the arpeggio, which is a nice idea. You also have him using some larger intervals and really also using a lot of chromaticism, so you kind of get the leading note to the third of G and then followed skipping up to get this encircling of the D, and that's really just coming out of the G major triad, even though in this case he's somewhat placing that on the D7 as well. And then the other thing that's happening is also with this use of sort of larger skips to move from one part of the line to the next, which really sort of breaks it up and makes it a lot less predictable and a lot more interesting to listen to. The reason I can keep on publishing videos every week is that I have a community of people over on Patreon that are supporting the channel. I'm very grateful for that, and I don't think it would be possible to make all these videos on such a specific topic as jazz guitar without their support. If you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page. If you join us over on Patreon, I can also give you something in return for your support. In this example, we have Tal Farlow really reharmonizing the chords and using that as a way to vary his solo. The changes that we're talking about here is G minor to F sharp diminished to F minor to B flat 7. And in the first chorus, he's just really clearly playing that diminished arpeggio on the F sharp diminished. But the second time around, he's turning it into an F sharp minor. And of course, this is something that you will find Parker do as well. Once in a while, he does that, especially on rhythm changes. But I think it is, the whole idea of parallel minor is something that's a little bit more connected with later music. So not in the 50s, but more in the 60s with Coltrane and McCoy Tyner and Wes and George Benson. But the first part of the phrase is also Tal Farlow using something that you don't see too often, which is a shell voicing as an arpeggio. So he really just plays G, B flat and F, which is a G minor 7 shell voicing. And then running down the arpeggio, so, and then back up to the F, going across the bar line. So the F is actually on the 1 of the next bar. And here we get the F sharp minor or G flat minor triad, and then he's anticipating the F minor, so we get first the F and then the A flat, and this is actually another shell voicing up to the E flat, and from the E flat we get a descending A flat major down to the C, so A flat major triad, and then skipping up to the G, which is a good example of how he uses larger intervals in sort of surprising places. And then on the B flat 7 we get two arpeggios. First a D half diminished, and that's played as a triplet, so, and then an A flat major 7, and then he's ending on the E flat by skipping down to the B flat. So with this example, I think you can tell how Kurt Rosenwinkel is influenced by Tal Farlow. I think some of the ways that Tal Farlow is using larger intervals in his lines is quite similar to the way that Kurt does it. And another thing that's also very typical for Kurt is to use sort of two arpeggios chained together, which is similar to this type of line where we first get the D half diminished and then moving up in the same movement up the A flat major triad to resolve to E flat. I think that's something that's typical for Kurt, and it's probably something he got from Tal. Another thing is also this idea that we saw in the first example, where there's sort of a direction in the melody, and that keeps on moving across the changes, which of course is this never-ending scale exercise idea. If you want to check out a video that I did where I'm analyzing some phrases from a Kurt Rosenwinkel solo, then check out this video. And if you want to learn more about jazz guitar and this is the first time you see one of my videos, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page. That's about it for this time. Thank you for watching, and until next time.